Thank you very much, Russell, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming to our session. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. It's the first time we've been to the Civil Service Live Conference, and really looking forward to this session and some of the others. I just want to set a little bit of context, really, for what we're covering today, which is leadership, or radical leadership. We started studying leadership more than 20 years ago, and we found as soon as you started to ask questions about what is a high-performing leader, you really had to understand the environment that they were operating in. And we found that there were a number of variables that were important. The first is your environment kind of stable, or is it moving a lot? Is it simple or is it complex? Is there change going on that's very tough, or is it relatively comfortable? And I guess what we found is that when we first started asking this question, a lot of people were still thinking, actually, we're relatively stable, relatively simple. Now, it's obviously taken for granted we're all up there, we're all in the tough, challenging environment. But it makes a huge difference because every so often you get kind of real peaks where the challenge becomes, even more intense. And I think we were in one of those now. So if you think of the civil service, if you think of some of the challenges that facing that organisation now, some of it is to do with transformational technology. Things like that. I mean, they weren't even around 15 years ago. We didn't even know those words. But when Obama did the 2.5-hour session about Osama bin Laden, there were 28 million tweets. I mean, how's that for scrutiny? I mean, it's just on a completely different scale. Some of it's to do with changing demographics, some of the challenges that we have economically, political uncertainty. Some of it's about personal challenge. But the point is that the civil service now is facing huge challenges, and it has to deliver more and more with less, and it's under immense scrutiny as well. And what that means is actually this has a huge impact on the sort of organisations that we need to create. So if you think about the traditional organisation where decisions are made at the top, they're passed down, people work in their silos. If there's a problem or a new situation, up it goes to the top for a decision. Things can move quite slowly because things aren't changing too fast. I'm not knocking it. That's probably one of the greatest inventions that we made in the 19th, 20th century. It works really, really well if your world is stable, simple, comfortable. However, if it's not, it doesn't work so well. And actually, what you need to do is create a different sort of organisation, one that's more externally focused, one that's, as soon as you start to kind of break up and focus externally, you've got to find a way to collaborate as well, because problems span lots of different boundaries. People need to be engaged, you need diversity, you need passion. It's a very different sort of organisation. And what we were trying to understand is, what is it that leaders do to create those kinds of organisations and to sustain them? So what do really high-performing leaders do in that kind of world? Actually, it turned out it was a very good question, because as we looked at our data and our research, we found that the more that you could describe your environment as challenging, the more the quality of the leaders made a difference to your performance. And we found up to 40% of the difference in performance could be explained purely by the quality of the leaders. And when I say leaders, I don't just mean the people at the top, I mean anyone whose responsibility is to improve the performance of another group of people. So we actually identified a set of complex learnt behaviours. I'm going to go through them really quickly because I know I haven't got a lot of time here. But one group was about, we call the thinking behaviours. It's about how leaders make sense of the world, get information, form ideas, and develop strategy. So it's all the stuff that goes on inside someone's head. Very, very important. If you're not getting that right, you're answering the wrong question to begin with. Then there's another group which is about action, results, execution, making things happen, because it's all very well having strategy, but then you've got to make sure it actually happens and you continuously improve against it. And if you think about it, those two sets of behaviours are about the task, really. There's another very important group then called the developing behaviours. This is how you build relationships, teams, develop people, build trust, the more kind of sophisticated human skills, if you like. And finally, there's a group of behaviours that we call the inspirational behaviours. This is more about how you present yourself externally, build confidence, build excitement and belief in your organisation. So all of these behaviours are important. We have actually 5 levels that we define them at. 5 is where you're using the behaviour to add value strategically in your organisation and change your organisation. 1 is where you're actually doing it to do negative things in your organisation. I'll explain that a bit more in the middle. And then 3 and 4 is really where you're using the behaviour tactically within your team to improve performance. So 5 levels of definition for each of them. I like to think of it a little bit like a periodic table. So in a way, those high performance behaviours, they're all the verbs, they're all the elements. There are 5 of them for each behaviour, so there's 55 overall. Some of them are actually toxic, like the level 1s I talked about. So, for instance, let's take empathy, which when you're doing that well, it's about really understanding someone, building trust, really, being able to kind of get inside their head. If you're using that at level 1, it's that you would maybe you constantly interrupt people, you overtalk, you don't listen, you interrogate them. Or you get a bit of information about them, then you use it to kind of, fire it back at them, and that creates a lack of trust. Teamwork at level 1 would be where, you centralise everything around yourself and you kind of divide and conquer. So all decisions come to you and then you speak to everyone individually. That doesn't create a lot of team atmosphere. So they're the toxic kind of behaviours. The ones I really love are the ones that are level 5. These are the ones that are very valuable. They add huge value to an organisation. So give you a few examples. IBM's project, which they did last year, Project Jammer, I don't know if any of you heard of that, but the idea was Obama asked IBM to help him understand some major world issues like world health, women's issues. And they using this technology called crowdsourcing, they went out, and it was an 8-week period, but the actual kind of session lasted for 3 days, and they got 155 countries contributing, 10,000 people giving their views, giving their ideas, what did they think the problems were. And then they had this amazing software that could then look for themes and kind of analyse it. And I read that and I thought, wow, that's kind of that information search, concept formation at a very high level, very strategic. And what a different way of going about solving a problem. Some other examples I like, Google, they have 1 day a week, which is personal development time. You can go and do anything you want. It doesn't have to be, in fact, it mustn't be on your list of objectives. The idea is you go out and you kind of develop something you're interested in. And they've had some of their best inventions through that. Gmail, some of their other kind of G-News, I think, all came out of this kind of this 20% time that they were giving to people. So a bit of a combination of conceptual flexibility and developing people. In fact, actually, I then heard at a conference that Google was speaking at did you know that the prize for the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2010 went to a group of people who invented something called a graphene, which is it's 1 atom thick, but it's 100 times the strength of steel, so pretty kind of impressive. And they did that. Again, they had like every Friday night, this is what physicists do on a Friday night, by the way, but every Friday night it was like, it's fun time. We're not going to do anything that we have a grant for or research paper to produce. We're just going to go out and explore and see what we can create. And that's where they kind of came up with this graphy. So it's just some of the kind of ways that you can use these level 5 behaviours to really harness creativity and ideas. And just one more example I like to give, because I love this one as well. This is about proactivity. The CEO of HCL Technologies, it was a very successful company, but it got very bureaucratic. He described it as a pyramid, and he had to invert it. So he came up with this idea that any member of staff could raise a ticket if they saw one of the procedures, systems, HR, finance, any senior manager blocking them from doing what they should be doing, which is serving the customer. And in the first month, 50,000 tickets were raised, which I think is pretty impressive. They solved them all, and then he said, well, actually, these have got to be connected. Let's try and get to the bottom of what this is. But what a great way of kind of getting rid of red tape. And it also reminded me what Gus O'Donnell said about, Red Tape Challenge Day, where let's put all these kind of, old rules out for everyone to look at and knock out the stupid ones. So if you can see what I mean by level 5, you can't write a competency definition for level 5. It's using those behaviours in a way that really does change things in a radical way. It is radical leadership. Now you see on there, some of these are quite rare because these behaviours, number one, they're learnt. Number two, not everyone is good at all of them. We've got thousands, tens of thousands of leaders in our database. They're not all good at all of these behaviours, which is fine. But when you look at a whole organisation, ideally you want to cover them all. So when we look at our entire database, we find that some behaviours are very well understood and developed, and some aren't. So generally getting information, forming ideas, being very kind of positive and confident and making them happen, we see that a lot. That's kind of the way organisations and leaders operate. What we don't see so much is the more kind of, you know, emotional intelligence, the empathy, the teamwork, conceptual flexibility. In fact, some of them are really poorly developed. And that is a huge challenge, because to create the kind of organisations we need, we've got to use these behaviours. So that's kind of the nub of the problem in a way. Whoops. Now, I'm sure I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to just give you 3 ideas of things that I think that you might just take away with you. The first one I would say is that don't underestimate the impact that you as a leader have on your team. This is from our World Trends data. Every year we collect tens of thousands of engagement surveys from organisations cross-culturally, cross-national boundaries, public sector, private sector, everything. And this just amazes me that when employees describe their leader as effective or highly effective, their average engagement score is in the 90s. On the other hand, when they describe their leader as less effective or ineffective, or they're neutral, their average score is around 17%. Now I know that in the civil service, the latest survey, I think the average engagement score is somewhere around 56%, about in the middle really, so lots of kind of opportunities on either side. But you know, we run a lot of coaching clinics where we get kind of middle and new managers to come, and it's like going to the GP. You can come and bring your problem with you. I would say half the problems they bring are about problems they're having with their bosses. Either the boss is never there, has no time for them, doesn't listen to them, doesn't involve them, won't make decisions when they need to, you know, or is more focused on their own career than others. So the downside is you can also have a big negative effect on your team, but that would be the first thought I would leave you with. The second thing I would say is focus on the things you can change. I mean, there's loads of stuff out there that drives us all nuts, but sometimes we can't do much about it. And I would never underestimate the issue about pay in the civil service, and also the disconnect between reality and perception. You know, something like 40% of civil servants earn less than 20k, so, you know, that isn't the perception externally. But unless you're in a position you can change that, maybe you leave that alone and you focus on the stuff you can change. Because, you know, when it comes to having good conversations with people, giving them feedback, managing performance more effectively, look at the scores that come out of the current survey. 2/3 of people are saying that poor performance is not managed very well in their organisation. So focus on what you can change. And finally, this is why leadership's so hard. It's because you actually do really need to understand human psychology. And if you think about change, this is a very simple little model, but if you think about change, which is happening all the time, you know, you can be in the contentment room, you're happy, you're comfortable, in your comfort zone, it feels really good. But things change, and if you stay there, you'll end up being in denial. So, you know, the leader's job is to get people to see that you've got to get out of that room. Your reward for doing that is you go into the confusion room where everything you knew has gone and the new stuff hasn't come in to replace it. So it's a very uncertain time. The leader's role is to build confidence, create a vision of the future, appeal to people's values. Values guide you through that kind of time. I guess a lot of us are actually in there at the moment, and it's an uncomfortable place to be. But you start seeing light at the end of the tunnel. You start to see a future where things are going to be better, and you move into the renewal room. And again, the leader's task there is to kind of get that bedded down, because otherwise it will escape you. So from a leader's point of view, understanding where you are and having a kind of radar that's saying, this is where we are, this is how my people are going to be feeling, this is how I can help them, you know, that's really one of the big contributions that you can make. So finally, all I can say is all roads point to leadership. You know, what's radical about what I've said? Well, some of it isn't radical, some of it is just common sense, you know. If by having honest, open, two-way communication, you're going to improve your employee engagement scores by a huge margin, let's just do it. It's common sense, but it's not common practice. Some of it is more radical. Level 5 behaviours are more radical. It's about how you change your organisation, your piece of it, even if it's just like a little microclimate that you create yourselves. So thank you very much. I'm sure I've run over on my time here, but enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm going to pass back to Russell for the
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Parry.
Thank you.
I think what's interesting about Chris's notes there was she's speaking not only, as I mentioned before, at a strategic level, what we at Connexa would call level 5, but also bringing that strategy to life in the detail. I can't remember who said that government is in the detail, and I also think leadership is in the detail as well. And I'm going to be joined now by Jerry and Sarah again. A round of applause for our interlopers. Thank you very much. If you'd like to come up. Now,
hello.
We mentioned earlier.
Hello, Russell.
Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm all right.
And just hop up on the stool there. I'm not a dentist. I'm just somebody introducing you. We mentioned earlier about coaching clinics, and what we'd like to do is to show you how we can begin to coach people in this sort of situation. What I'd ask you to do is, I'm going to get Sarah to talk us through what the situation is in just a moment, but I shall be turning to you in a moment to coach Sarah. I really want you to think about how she achieves her objective. Does she really go for it and understand the true objective? And finally, in keeping with the theme, how radical is she being? We have roving mics and we're not afraid to use them, so be prepared to give us some ideas in a moment. Sarah, tell us about the situation.
Okay, I'm about to have a meeting with Jerry here. I am Jerry's manager, and Jerry wants to talk to me about a newcomer to his team. This man is called Colin, and Colin is not performing as well as both I and Jerry would have liked. I'm particularly concerned because I've seen evidence recently of Colin's work and it hasn't been up to standard. Up until this point, Colin has exceeded all expectations in every department he has been in. He's been recruited internally for this particular post in Jerry's team. So what I want to do now is really find out what's going on, why it's going on, and if we can put some measures in place to help improve his performance. So this is new to me, trying to be a radical leader. So I'm going to try my best, and then I'm going to come back to you and ask you for some feedback. So what I'd like you to do is take some mental notes, see how I'm doing, what I could maybe do differently next time, and then we're going to rerun it with your expert input. So I'm going to go in. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Sarah, you okay?
Thank you for coming in.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Now, I know time is precious.
Yes, it is.
So let's get to the heart of the matter.
Okay.
Colin, I know you have concerns, as do I.
Colin.
Fill me in on what's going on at the moment, Jerry.
Yeah, it's just been really frustrating, Sarah. I
Been
basically,
really frustrating.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I had this high flyer came into the
Yes.
department, into the
Yes.
team 6 months ago. Apparently, he was, you know, exceeding expectations.
Absolutely.
Came with lots of knowledge, and
Yes.
he's just been really poor, completely
He's-
poor. Yeah, just, I mean, he's barely scraping meeting expectations at the moment, to be honest, and I'm really frustrated.
Okay, well, I'm really sorry that that's how you're feeling right now, Jerry.
Right.
First of all, can you give me some specific examples of where he's not meeting the grade?
Just he's not meeting objectives.
So he's not meeting objectives?
No.
I thought he had met objectives.
Well, not my objectives.
Okay, so not meeting your objectives.
No.
Not meeting your objectives, and anything else that's happening right now?
He's just really quiet.
He's very quiet?
Yeah, just really withdrawn in meetings. He just doesn't contribute.
He's withdrawn in meetings, okay. That's worrying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and Jerry, what are you doing about this? How are you, what measures have you put in place so far
Well,
to try and deal with this situation?
my door is always open.
Your door is always
Yeah, I
open?
mean, I said that to him.
You've told him that his door is open?
Yeah, I just said, you know, if any help, you know, come talk to me.
Okay.
But I mean, I didn't expect to have to say that to someone coming with all this kind of,
Yes.
you know, how fantastic he was. But it's just really, I mean, I don't know whether it's something that I'm doing something really different, my management skills, or
Jerry, can I just reassure you right now, don't get paranoid. What I'm seeing here, and I'm very impressed with this, is you asking yourself the question, is it me?
Yeah, I am.
This is evidence of you really embracing the concept of serving to lead. So well done.
Thanks.
Well done. I'm very proud of you.
Yeah,
for that.
it's good to hear that. I thought it was me. I was going nuts. But yeah,
no,
thanks so much, Sarah.
No, not at all. So well done.
Yeah, thank you.
And the other thing is, Jerry, you know, you've said to him, my door is open. How did he respond?
Well, he didn't walk through the door.
Okay. He didn't walk through the door, but you did try your best.
I mean, I say to everyone, I'm not going to nurse all my team. You know, I empower them. You know, they're individuals. So I'm not going to.
Okay. Okay. Well, Jerry, my advice to you really is to keep doing more of the same.
Okay, great.
If you're asking him to contribute, you're telling him that your door is open.
Yeah.
You're keeping yourself available to him. Keep doing that.
Great. Okay.
It sounds as if he just needs a bit more time and space to sort of find his feet in the team.
Well, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's really great advice. Thanks. Thanks for telling me it's not me. It's,
no,
I
it
thought I
really
was going
isn't
mad.
you, Jerry. You know, you're doing your bit, But do keep me in the loop. I want to keep track on this.
Of course.
And I hope you know that my door is always open. Okay? And if you can just shut it on the way out, that would be great.
I will do. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
So, how did she do?
How did I do?
She's what? She's quite bad. So, where was that coming from?
Quite bad.
Quite bad. Was that from the ladies who were nodding and smiling down here? I saw you. There was a nudge there. Where was that? Who's quite bad? Her management skills are quite appalling. What advice would you give Sarah?
Should be up, sorry. My door is open, but surely there must be an underlying problem with the member of staff, really, with Colin. We need to establish what the problem is first is. He hasn't spoken to the guy at all.
How radical is she being then?
Well.
Not very. The lady...
No.
Frankly, just take the mic. What's your name? Sorry.
Carol.
Carol. So how radical is she being? How radical is Sarah?
It's my first go.
Yes.
Come on, guys.
I don't think you've been very radical, because what I was missing was the actual Colin. Because I think speaking to Colin directly would possibly have been the best solution, because you're not speaking to Colin, you're speaking through his manager on his own interpretation.
Okay. Sarah speaking to Colin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why not?
okay, thank you very much. Any others? We've got a lady just here who raised a hand and just like at school then began to scratch her head. Yes, we'll go to you anyway.
You give positive reinforcement to, I've forgotten his name, with no evidence that he's actually done anything right. And also you're saying do more of the same when the same's not working. So to be radical, you need to think what different you can do.
What would you recommend? A piece of script, as it were. What would you recommend?
I would facilitate a meeting between the manager and Colin to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, I'll take one more just for the sake of time. The gentleman just there. Thanks, Nita. The gentleman just there in the shirt, which is quite obvious, but still. There you go. The lavender shirt, I think.
I came in my shirt today.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the first failure was having started to ask about objectives, you then lay off and didn't drill down and find out what the explicit objectives were. It was just left as a hanging question. As you say, you then failed to challenge on whether or not there really was anything positive being done to address the Colin issue. You let that just slide over, and as the other lady said, you then simply reassured Jerry that he was doing everything well. I think you should have been much harder, much more direct, and have sought the evidence before then looking for a solution.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Do you want to give it another go?
Can I quickly summarise what I'm going to do? So I'm going to go back in there. Thank you for your input. I'm going to drill down. I'm going to delve more. I'm not going to let Jerry off the hook from what I'm being told here. It's all about Jerry and not about Colin and how we can serve Colin better. I can't organise a meeting right now with Colin, so I'm going to see what I can do here with Jerry. So I'm going to drill down and I'm going to try and find a way of getting Jerry to be accountable. So I'm going to be a bit braver, get Jerry to be accountable and not reinforce bad behaviour from Jerry.
And also, just one thing that came out as well is how you get Colin into the conversation at another point when he's available. So
to get Colin, to organise that meeting so I can be with Colin and Jerry in the same room. Okay, in I go. Jerry, hi.
Sarah.
Now, I know from our previous conversations that you've had some concerns about Colin, as have I. What I want to make very, very clear about this meeting is that what we're really going to be discussing is how you manage Colin's performance.
Okay, but you've had concerns about Colin as well. That's good to hear.
I have had concerns about Colin because up till now he's been a real high flyer and suddenly he's stalling. And I want to find out what's happening with Colin.
Well, that's what I want to find out. I mean, that's,
So what I'd like from you is, can you tell me specifically what the gaps are that you're seeing in Colin's performance?
In his performance?
Yes.
Just, there's gaps in his knowledge, for instance.
There's gaps in his knowledge.
Which was quite surprising. The other day, he just came over to give, asking me for some detail in a project, and I was thinking, why are you asking me? You should know.
Okay, so Colin is 6 months in. He's a newcomer.
Yeah, plenty of time.
It's a step up for Colin, and he's come to you asking for advice. How do you think Colin felt when you gave him that response?
Right, I know where you're going with this, Sarah, but I mean, I know he's new, but he needs to be able to integrate himself quicker, and and the fact that he's not speaking up in meetings and he's really quiet and reserved. You know, I can't do anything about that. I've encouraged him to be more open in the meetings. I said, come on, let's hear you. And
okay. Jerry, as Colin's manager, you are accountable. You are accountable. It is your responsibility to help integrate Colin into the team. I really want to stress he's new. This is a new role for him. And he was brave enough to come to you and ask you for help. So,
yeah, okay, fair point, yeah. Cool.
Have you put measures in place so far to help Colin feel integrated, feel confident within meetings as you've discussed?
Well, you know, we had a drink. You know, we all, yes, you know, when Sheila, she had the karaoke for her birthday, we all went out. You know, it's important to me, to everyone to sort of socialise, and, you know, I hope that would be sort of a way of him relaxing in the team.
And did Colin come?
No, he didn't come, to be honest, no.
Okay.
He said he was busy.
So you've taken measures, but right now those measures aren't working. So so what you need to do is to look at different types of measures that work specifically for Colin. Each member of the team is individual. Tell me more about these meetings. You said he was quiet. How was he quiet?
He was just kind of, during the meetings, he would sort of just agree, or he would point out that something was interesting. Okay. Sort of, there's no sort of collaboration, sort of no builds, nothing really. I mean, you know, so.
What did you expect him to be doing in those meetings?
Well, from what I'd heard about him before he arrived, then I was expecting to kind of dazzle and just have a lot of input, and that's not there. The guys in my team are really sort of very lively, and there's a really good energy, and people really chip in, and it's what I encourage.
Which is great, but I imagine for a newcomer that might be quite an intimidating environment.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is if he's new, yeah. Fair enough.
Have you had a discussion with Colin on his own about what you expect from him in the meetings? Does he know how you expect him to contribute?
What, a one-on-one meeting?
Yeah.
Well, the quarterly, we had a chat about it.
Okay.
When I told him he wasn't, you know, performing, meeting expectations.
Okay, and how did he respond to that?
Well, he looks a little bit down about it, and, you know.
Okay. So just to sum up, Jerry, what I'm getting is that Colin right now is quite demoralised. And not confident. I'm not surprised he's not contributing.
Yeah, I mean,
at team meetings.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I just presumed he would sort himself out, and I guess I was expecting too much, and maybe I should be doing more. I don't know.
Do you think you could be doing more, Jerry?
You know, naturally, I don't like to get too involved, but maybe, I have sort of taken a step back and let him get on with it, and perhaps that's something I need to. I don't know whether I should. I don't exactly what I should be doing, but.
So what could you do? What measures could you put into place to help integrate Colin, to help him feel more involved, so he's more confident about contributing?
I guess we could just have a more sort of informal meeting, really. And I mean, like I said, I do say my door's open, but I haven't actually really sort of approached him, I guess.
So for you to approach Colin?
No, I haven't really sort of done that. That's, you know, I always say come and talk to me, but maybe I could do that.
Okay. And I'm going to take time out. Can I just get some feedback? How am I doing? Am I a bit better?
Yes. You're happy there. Do you recognise this one? Yes, absolutely. The ladies who
smile. You recognise this? Is this familiar? Yeah. I think certainly from the feedback that I've been given, holding Jerry more accountable, we're beginning to find out what's going on with Colin and how Jerry can really help improve his performance by just taking that extra time and treating him very much as an individual and not as the rest of the team. And what I'd like to do is find a way of wrapping it up so that when Jerry leaves, he's going to do things slightly differently. So can I have some ideas as to how I can wrap this up?
Over there. I'll come to you.
If you're Jerry's line manager, one of the things that should be smacking you in the face like a wet fish is the fact that he needs some leadership and management development.
From me? So I'm not doing my job so well. Okay. So some acknowledgement that I've let him down. Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else?
Okay, we've got one here. We'll just take this as the last one and then finish.
it might also be an idea to talk to the former line managers of Colin to see what they did to make Colin perform so well in his past jobs.
For me or for Jerry to have meetings with his previous line managers?
Probably at both levels.
At both levels. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I think if you just go into that.
All right, then I'm going to go straight in. Jerry, first of all, I want to acknowledge that I think I've actually let you down as I don't think I've had enough, I haven't given you enough input as to what I expected of you as Colin's manager, so I apologise for that.
Okay.
And I think what we should do is have another meeting where we really, really go through the expectations and how we can meet those. How does that sound?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah, if you've got the time, that would be great. Yeah.
I also wondered about the possibility of organising a meeting for you to meet Colin's previous line managers. Would that be helpful for you to find out how they worked with Colin?
I don't know really. I think it might be a little bit invasion of privacy, asking how that. I don't feel quite comfortable with that. But.
Okay, well we'll have a think about it, but I'll shelve it for now. But have a think about it. Okay. What I'd like to know before you leave, Jerry, is what measures are you going to put in place to change the way things are right now with Colin, to make you the radical leader that I know and believe you can be?
I think what's come out of this is I need to really understand Colin's perspective.
To understand Colin's perspective?
Yeah, because obviously I just really hadn't sort of. I need to be much braver, and I need to, not just say the door's open. I need to go across the corridor and approach him and sit down and have a conversation and just find out exactly what is going on, and just being braver with that and talking about the expectations, where we can set the bar, and just make an agreement on that, and I think just be a little bit braver on that one.
Yeah, and that goes for me too. More and different communication, that's what I'm asking for, Jerry, and I think that's what you're all asking of me, to be bigger and braver and really delve in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jez. Jerry and Sarah there, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have this idea of radical in thought and radical in action as well. So it requires courage. I'm going to widen that debate now. I'm going to ask to come onto the stage now General Andrew Graham and also a lady we met earlier, Chris Parry, if you'd like to come up here. I'll just introduce General Graham briefly. Thank you. Where is my little note? I'm General Graham. His military history, I should say, is while I'm looking for this, I think you can introduce yourself, can't you, Andrew?
Ladies and gentlemen, this seems very odd that there should be a soldier on the stage at Civil Service Live. I am a government servant, and I have been for 36 years. And most of the last 18 years, I've been working in absolute collaboration alongside members of Ministry of Defence Civil Service and indeed other government departments and indeed private enterprise and elsewhere through the various PFIs and elsewhere. My last 6 years have been in training and education. First of all, to recruit and train the Army, select it, recruit and train it, working with Andrew Jackson from Connexa, now with Connexa, but then in the Army, and most recently the Defence Academy, where one of the things we do is leadership, Defence Strategic Leadership Programme, Strategic Management Programme, and of course the fact of life for the services is that leadership is not optional. We want soldiers who can lead.
Okay, I'm going to take a few points from Chris and Andrew Graham in just a moment, but also think about questions you'd like to ask about their experience of radical leadership and how it can be applied to the challenges you face within the civil service. I'll just remind you what Gus O'Donnell said when he was speaking at the Canada School of Public Services. The British civil service must strengthen its leadership capabilities, become more creative, deepen its commercial skills and understanding of markets, and increase its productivity by improving employee engagement. So the first question I'll ask you, both of you, it doesn't matter who goes first, is when you think of radical leadership within the civil service, what are some images that first come to mind? Graham.
I think for me, the radical leadership tag is interesting. I think it's actually leadership is not optional, and I think that the issue is, are the circumstances in which you find yourselves sufficiently challenging, demanding, testing, tough, complex, whatever other word you want to use, that radical, or that much overused word, innovative solutions are required. I'm pretty clear that innovative doesn't mean new. Innovative means it changes the market. And the way I like to think of it, and it's a very simple one, and people use it in strategic terms, is the whole notion of ends, balancing ends, ways, and means. What are your means? Money, people, capability, knowledge. What are your ends? What are you trying to achieve? A health service, a defence capability that can be ready to do whatever it may be. And then if the means seem to be a bit short, and if the ends seem to be quite challenging, you've really got to work at the ways. What are the innovative and imaginative ways in which you look at how you do things in order to stretch the means such that you don't have to compromise the ends? I think it's doable, but it is an ends and means aspect. So to me, that is the notion that I think sometimes is a wee bit lacking. The idea that you tackle the middle bit rather than worrying about the ends or complaining about the lack of money.
So did you say that we need to attack the middle piece rather than worrying? Pardon?
The ways.
The ways of doing things, the action. Chris, how about yourself? When you think of radical leadership within the civil service, what are the images that come to mind?
I think probably the biggest challenge that all organisations are facing now, and what's the biggest difference between now and 10, 20 years ago, is that we can't be successful unless every employee comes to work prepared to give 110%. What we can't do is sit and program exactly what everyone has to do. They come in, they work in their box, they follow their job description, it doesn't change over time. That world has gone, and it's certainly gone for the civil service just as much as it has everywhere else. And what kind of really strikes me is that, as I alluded to in those slides, that what the leader does, the immediate manager and the senior leaders, what they do makes all the difference between whether someone comes to work to give their all, bring all their creativity, all their imagination, which is part of the human condition, or whether they don't, whether they walk in and they leave that all behind. You kind of almost feel like you could throw everything away and just focus on making your managers and leaders really effective. Because that will make all the difference. Okay. So that's what the image I have in my mind. It's how do you harness that creativity, that passion, that knowledge that everyone in the organisation has and traditionally doesn't kind of bring with them.
Okay, thank you. Last week, Andrew, Andrew, when we spoke, you talked about the difference between operational people and people. We spoke about kind of often managers or leaders leave some of the tougher decisions to operational people and don't take them on themselves. Is that something that you think, broadly speaking, the civil service should begin to address?
I'm not sure that sort of separation applies. I mean, it seems to me that, if you take the services as an example, and I think there's a clue in the title, civil service, armed service, we're actually all in service. If you take the armed services as an example, we are ideally ready to go. We're not necessarily doing. We are about contingency. We are about being prepared to fight the nation's wars and, if necessarily, doing it. And when we are doing it, we need to be getting back to that former situation while having succeeded in what we're tasked to do. And I would argue, and some would say, that it's the leadership in the sort of operational piece that is, in a sense, more complex and more difficult, because that's when all the issues of family, home, resources, policies, legislation, and come into play. Meanwhile, on operations, actually, the end is very, very clear, and the ways are tactical and manipulation of what you've got. So I do think that and of course, the civil service tend to live that life the whole time. All the time is the most difficult time in which to lead and command.
All the time?
All the time for the civil service is tough. Whereas actually when we go away, you've got everybody behind you, it's relatively straightforward, albeit it's complex, albeit it's frightening, albeit it's challenging.
So if I interpret that in my mind, it's a difference between it being chronically tough and sometimes acute tough in the military. Chris, you mentioned, unless there's anything you want to add to what the General said, you mentioned earlier about the level 5 behaviours. What I've noticed working with people who can think like that, sometimes there's not the connection in terms of carrying out the actions. People have great ideas. Sarah has a great idea, but the action doesn't compel it forward. How often would you say you see that in some of the things that you, or some of the organisations you've worked with?
Well, I think, different people have different talents. So some people are more naturally orientated to have kind of creative, imaginative ideas. They're not necessarily the people that can implement them, which is why when you look at a team, you actually need to kind of cover all the bases. And rather than try and get everyone to be quite good at everything, our view is really play to the strengths that you have in your team, but make sure that you cover the areas that aren't covered. The other thing I would add as well is that not everyone wants to be a leader, and a lot of the time in my consulting, I spend time working with people, coaching very senior people who actually never really wanted to be leaders, but that was the main route open to them. You know, they should have been the best technical person, the best negotiator, the best, you know, whatever it was, but instead, in order to get kind of promoted and pay increase, they had to go up the leadership route. That's a big problem as well.
The accidental manager will stop you. You're really good at this, so we'll stop you doing it and get you to do that with no support whatsoever. Anything you wanted to add to that point, just before we go to the audience?
No.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've been quite quiet, apart from one or two people asking Sarah to do things. Questions from yourself about radical leadership? We've got a hand up over there. If you could just introduce yourself and what part of the civil service you're from, that would be great.
Hello, yes, I'm Ian Mitchell. I'm currently an operational research manager with the Department of Business Innovation and Skills. I'm also a very dormant territorial army captain. Sir, I wanted to particularly to ask about the role of personal example, because a phrase I've found often comes up on leadership is the regiment wears the complexion of its colonel. So do you have any views on how leaders can best influence the climate in their organisations by personal example? My own experience has been that until one's had the first crisis and it's been resolved, then you aren't really accepted as a leader. And my particular crisis was, I think, upside down in a scramble net on one of the unfashionable assault courses in Thetford. But it was just after that that I realised that the people I was leading actually recognised me as a leader.
I've gone. That's okay. I think organisationally, it depends on three things. The first is it's all about people. And so your point about personal example, or at least personal influence, number one. So yes, it's about people. Much more difficult when you're in a big organisation. Again, Slim, that great man, used to say, leadership, it's you. It's about the projection of personality. My deduction, you better have a personality to project. Oh, and by the way, leadership, like some germs, doesn't pass terribly well through other people's bodies. So, you know, spreading it down through the layers is quite difficult to do. Big challenge. How does up there connect down there? Not necessarily personally, but in a sense by communication or whatever it might be. He did it by walking the walk. He was out 1/3 of the time just talking to groups of people. I don't think enough people do that sort of thing. You can't touch everybody. And the second thing, of course, is the way, affecting that, is the clarity of the way in which you communicate. Very clear, very simple. In his case, we are going to beat the Japanese army. Boom. Believe that, now let's move on. So number one, it is about people and how you do that. The second, it's all about building trust and confidence. And you better be trusting and confident in your boss, in the sense and the quality of their decisions. You may not like them hugely or whatever, but there is a different thing between, as it were, trust, confidence, respect, if you like, than there is about liking and all of that sort of stuff. The liking bit is perhaps can be weak on the difficult days. So that's the thing. And the third is a particular fad of mine, is we talk an awful lot about leadership and management. I think there is a third triangle, which we, of course, in the military are happy with, which is called command. It is that notion of taking decisions, taking responsibility for the decisions, and leading those immediately around you to deliver against their decisions. So at the senior level of a department, you take decisions, take responsibility, then you lead probably at board level those around you. And that is personal influence, personal walking and talking and making sure that everybody is in the mind and moving in the direction you want to go. And then it cascades, which of course leads to the absolute incredible difficulty of generating appropriate followership. And how do you generate that business that the subordinate 2 and 3 down gets the intent 2 and 3 up, and doesn't just listen to it and go, nah, but goes, yes, I get it, I'm adding value, and I'm translating it. That's not parrot fashion quoting. That is absolutely critical element of personality translated through, one might call it, example. And I don't think it's always as easy. You cannot do it if you're, Permanent Secretary of Defence. You cannot touch the 77,000 civil servants who aren't in Whitehall. But so how are you going to do it? Question.
Okay. Some other questions. We've got Anita, there's just a lady just 2/3 of the way back. I think you'll get there before Rob. And anybody else, just while we're at it, so I can see where I need to send the mic next. And we'll have one just there. Okay, so the lady just on my right.
Hello, my name's Jackie Ross. I'm a middle manager in HM Revenue and Customs. Listening to Sir Gus O'Donnell's comments about the need for challenge in his earlier session this morning, how does a radical leader make it safe for people lower down in the organisation to challenge, especially in hierarchical structures such as the armed forces? Thank you.
Well, I would answer trust and confidence again. It's not a Chinese parliament, and it shouldn't be a Chinese parliament. But in coming to a plan, interesting on Chris's 4, making the strategy was written in the left-hand box under the thinking. I would argue there's probably between thinking and doing, there's a planning bit, which actually means giving the direction to say, this is now what we're going to do, or the deciding piece. But getting to decisions, you can't know everything. So I would say challenge is about up and down context, understanding the broader context, and then people working together to come to what might be reasonable solutions. Often the best idea will be from the gunner on the back, on the back sanger who knows the area better than the commander does. And just because he knows it, you'd be a very unwise person. It comes back to confidence between people. Mm-hmm. So I am absolutely confident and happy that the best way to arrive at good solutions is by involving everybody in the discussion at the early stage when you're understanding context and trying to work out what the world you're really in is, not the one you wish you were in. And that's another problem that people have. People tend to deal with a situation they'd like to be rather than one that's actually there. And you can only know the one that there is everybody's engaged in giving you the feedback. Mm-hmm. So I feel that it works. Okay. But you need humility.
Chris, anything you want to add?
But you are absolutely right that it's a very fragile thing to do. So if you kind of say, look, I'm encouraging challenge, I'm encouraging dissent, you better behave in a way that kind of demonstrates that people are safe doing it, you know. It's a bit like implementing a 360 program and then getting your feedback and saying, I want to know who said this about me, you know, who wrote that. Yeah. I actually worked with a CEO who kind of went through those stages, and what he now does, he has his 360 online, anyone can contribute anything, and everyone can see all the comments as well. I mean, it's quite a long journey, but you know, that really is building a climate where people feel they can speak out without being, you know, penalised.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you. And I think got time for one final question, then we'll be with, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Philip Wilson from Farstream. I was just wondering how you would characterise being radical in a civil service context, and maybe some examples of how that would actually look.
Me? Okay. I came from an organisation that was 1/3 government employee, military civilian, and 2/3 contractor. We didn't call it contractorised or privatised or anything like that. What we did was look at who was the best person to provide, in our case, academic services, a university. No point in trying to breed it ourselves, so we did that. The support, you know, gardening, hotel services, and etc. Is it better to do it in-house or out-of-house? Who is the best person to provide? So my own view comes back to ways. Ends, I want an academy which. Means, I've got this much money, and I've got lots of government employees. But are they best employed in the ways mix to balance means and ends? Answer, no, hence what I would prefer to call collaborative and partnered arrangement. So I think the key word for the next 10 years will be collaboration and cooperation with perhaps unlikely partners. And of course there are inevitable consequences in that, but that to me is the really radical approach. And of course it's bigger than just a capital P word or a capital C word. It is a notion of getting the best for the money that you've got, i.e. more for less or more the same. You can't do it any other way, in my opinion.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the amount of time we have for today. Obviously, we're here all day and tomorrow and Thursday. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our guest speakers. As it's now resembling, the heat in this room resembling something like a scene from To Kill a Mockingbird, will pause. All I'd say is thank you very much for your attention and your focus today and being with us at Connexa. One of the key behaviours we see that are often underplayed in all organisations is this idea of conceptual flexibility. It sounds complicated, in the end it isn't. What it is about showing you're working out. It's about balancing one idea against another before you act. And I think in the last 2 or 3 years, I've got a list as long as my arm of clients who've come to me and said, how can we get people to do that? That conversation we'll be more than willing to have with you. The stand is down by the front door. Somebody's phoning me already. So thank you very much and goodbye. Thank you.